First of all, thank you very much having this chat. I appreciate you giving your time, and
Absolutely.
I know you must be pretty busy.
Not any more than you. So
one of the main things I wanted to discuss with you is the impact of COVID and the lockdown and the economic devastation on our poor people, and how we should be thinking about it. I mean, we've had in India for some time a policy framework, particularly when we were in the UPA, of providing a sort of a floor for poor people, Narega, right to food, etc. And now a lot of that work is going to sort of fall by the wayside because we have this disease coming, and millions and millions of people are going to fall back into poverty. So this is something. I mean, how should one think about this?
Right. So I think that these are kind of separable in my view, in the sense that I think that the real problem in the very short run is that these, I think, more policies, good policies put in place by the UPA are inadequate. And the government, in a sense, absolutely embraced them. I mean, it was not that there was a particular partisan disagreement there. There was very clear that the UPA instruments will be used for doing whatever it is. I think what is harder to wrap one's head around is what do you do about the people who are not covered by that? And that's a lot of people, the migrants in particular. One of the ideas that was mooted, I think, in the last years of the UPA, but also embraced by the current government, was the idea that the Aadhaar would be made national and therefore would be used for PDS and other things. So the Aadhaar-based claims on PDS would be eligible. You would be eligible for it wherever you are. And that would have been wonderful to have that right now. Sort of looking back, I would say that would have saved a lot of misery, because I think a lot of people would have then gone to the local ration shop and said, "Here's my Aadhaar. I'm eligible for PDS. I'm collecting PDS in Mumbai, even though my family resides in Malda or Darbhanga or whatever. That's my claim." And so I think the fact that that didn't happen means that there's a bunch of people for whom there isn't really a system. And they are eligible to Narega because they are in Bombay, and there's no Narega in Bombay. They're not eligible for PDS because they're not actually residents. Part of the problem in this very short run is that the conceptualization of the welfare structure was based on the idea that anybody who's really not in where they're supposed to be is actually working and is earning an income, and therefore we don't have to worry about them. And that's what's collapsed. And then the question of poverty is not obvious to me that if the economy revives, there needs to be a durable effect on poverty. The real concerns are, will the economy revive? And in particular, how does one think through the possible time paths of this disease through that process? I think we should try to be optimistic about the survival of the overall economic well-being of the country.
So we are talking about some version of Nyay, or a direct cash transfer to the poorest people.
Absolutely, a direct cash transfer. Whether it's to the poorest people, that's more debatable. I would argue for a broader, because I think targeting is extremely costly.
Yeah,
you try to target in this mess. You try to target and figure out who's become poor after their shop was shut for 6 weeks. I don't know whether how we figure this out. I wouldn't try to figure it out. I would say, bottom 60% of the population, we give them some money. Nothing bad will happen, in my view. That if we gave them some money, well, some of them will not need it, but fine, they'll spend it. And if they spend it, that will have stimulus effect. So the only place where maybe I'm more aggressive than you are in that sentence is that I think I would go beyond the poorest people.
So you're talking for a massive priming of the pump up front, So you start up the demand as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'm absolutely saying that. I've been saying that for a while, actually. Even before this happened, I've been saying that we have a demand problem. Now we have going to have a bigger demand problem because it's the usual thing. I have no money. I'm not buying anything because my shop is closed, but then your shop is closed because I'm not buying anything from you. So I think.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
And I think implicit in what you're saying is that you need to do it faster rather than slower. So the faster you do it, the more effective it's going to be.
Yeah,
so every second lost is actually damaging.
You're right in saying I want it fast. I don't want to have us checking everybody's locus standi and whether they're appropriate for this or not. I do think that it may be we shouldn't induce a mismatch of supply and demand by giving people spending power where we have shut down the entire retail sector because they are in the red zone or something. So we need to plan that a bit better than, so that there's you get the money when you can go out and buy, not now. Or you get a promise. You get a promise that you will get the money, so you stop panicking, you stop completely, starving yourself because you want to have a little bit of savings left. So if people were reassured that, in 2 months or whenever the lockdown will be lifted, they're going to have some money in their hands, I think they would be much less worried about it, and they'll be more willing to spend already. And some of them have some savings; they'll spend it. So I feel that we shouldn't necessarily rush into it because there may be places where there's no production right now, there's no supply right now. So putting money in will just burn the money. There'll be inflation. We want to wait for that. But with that caveat, yes, soon.
There is a balance between the centralization and the decentralization aspects. I mean, it's true that each state has its own nuances. Kerala is doing something completely different. Uttar Pradesh is doing something completely different. But then the central government also has a particular role that they have to play. And there's a tension I can see between these two ideas.
You're completely right that this is a tension, and clearly the migrant movement question cannot be handled by a state government. It's a little bit odd that it's being handled so much bilaterally that, in a sense, I feel that that's a problem, because this is a place where you don't want to decentralize because you want to actually aggregate the information. If this is a population of people who are very infected, you don't want them to be moving through the whole country. And so I feel that that's a place where we should have tested people before they're allowed to board a train or something. Yeah. So that's a central question. Yeah. That's something that only a federal government can do, is tell the government of UP that you cannot just bring your migrants home. Conversely, I think the question of how to serve migrants in Bombay city is the Maharashtra government's problem and or the Bombay city municipality's problem. And you can't have, the federal government resolving that. So I think that you're exactly right. But I mean, what's your thought on that? Right now, it seems like we are sort of it seems like it's something that can't possibly be resolved. In the longer run, I think we need to think of, institutions which are more robust in that way. But right now, I don't see what we can do about it.
And how do you see this thing playing out, once the disease washes out 6 months from now, from the poverty aspect? I mean, there's obviously going to be a backlash, economic backlash. There's going to be bankruptcies. How do we sort of think of it in the medium term as opposed to the immediate short term?
Right. So that's sort of what we were talking about a little bit before, which is, this question of, I think, a demand shortfall. I think there are two concerns. One is how to avoid a chain of bankruptcies. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe writing off a lot of debt is the way to avoid that, as you had mentioned. And the other one is a demand shortfall, and getting some cash into the hands of the population is the best way to kickstart the economy. And the US is very aggressively doing that. And this is a Republican administration run by a bunch of financiers, in fact, and they are willing to do it where we should be willing. I mean, this is not run by like a bunch of socially minded liberals. It's run by people who used to work in the financial sector, but they've decided that just for economic survival of the economy, we need to pump money into people's hands. And I think we should take a cue from that.
This is also changing the sort of balance of power in the world to an extent. That is also pretty clear. How do you think about that?
I think that both of them are right. I'm very worried for countries like France and Italy, which especially Italy, I think, had a fairly disastrous outcome, and partly that's a result of the state being not. But I mean, the Italian state has been run by, really, not very, let's say, distinguished people for a while, and as a result, it's sort of the health system was on the last legs when this hit. The US moving much more in a nationalist direction is extremely frightening for the world, for the rise of China being a threat, but if the US starts reacting to it, it could be extremely destabilizing threat. So I think that's something to worry about a lot.
The undercurrent is that strong leaders can take on this virus. What is being sold is that it requires one man to charge into, against the virus. That's really the problem.
That has been disastrous, as we know. I mean, the US and Brazil are two countries which are just messing up right and left, and these are two quote-unquote strong men behaving like they pretending that they understand anything, but even what they say every day is kind of laughable. So we have this. If anybody wanted to believe in the strongman theory, this is the time to disabuse themselves.
Thank you very much, and
thank you. That was a pleasure.
Please, when you're in India, let's have a cup of tea or something.
Yes, that would be lovely.
Yeah, and regards to everyone at home.
Yes, likewise, and take care of yourself.
इस खबर को अभी लाइक करें, शेयर करें और ऑनलाइन न्यूज इंडिया की सभी खबरें अपने मोबाइल फोन पर सबसे पहले देखने के लिए अभी चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करें और घंटी जरूर दबाएं।